Hi everyone, it's Taylor here, and today we're going to be creating these 3 clean and simple cards featuring beautiful ginkgo illustrations. We have 3 different products that all feature ginkgo leaves. One of them is the Peace and Hope Stamp and Die Combo with a large and a small ginkgo leaf that can be die cut with the coordinating dies. We also have the Ginkgo Background stamp and the Ginkgo Foilet that features 4 different patterns that can be foiled with a Mink machine or a laminator. I'll also be using the Grateful Greetings stamp with coordinating dies and the foilet of the same sentiments that can be cut out with the same dies. I have the Abstract Accents Stencil and Clear combo. I'll just be using the stencils, the Arched Stacklets, and the Diagonal Stitched Rectangle Stacklets. For ink colors, I chose Poblano Pepper, Honey, and Rosewater. And then I'll be doing some embossing, so I have my VersaMark ink pad, my powder tool, and gold fine detail embossing powder. For the foiling, we'll be using the mini Mink machine along with gold foil. And then I have my Post-it removable labeling tape and my Just Press tool for my MISTI. So let's get started. We have these 3 products that I'll be featuring in the 3 different cards. As I mentioned, the foilet pack has multiple different patterns, and we'll be using the one that focuses up the center of the panel. But first we're going to start with the Abstract Accents, the stencils that I mentioned I'll be using from that set. There are multiple different shapes that you can use to stencil your piece of paper into whatever abstract combination that you like. So in this case, I've chosen a large shape and am blending with honey ink. I've started with a light hand and then given it a little bit of depth and shadow toward the bottom of that shape. Now I'm overlapping this second circular shape and stenciling that with rosewater ink, and then the smallest will be done with Poblano Pepper and my Bitty blender brush. Poblano is a very intense color, so I tried to have a light hand with that one. Now I'm going to place that ginkgo leaf over the top of my abstract background and use my powder tool to condition the paper so that the gold embossing powder will only stick where I want it to. So I've stamped that with VersaMark ink. We can pour the gold embossing powder over the top, and then we'll heat that with a heat tool. You can see those 3 colors work really beautifully with the gold embossing powder. And now I'm going to cut that out with the Arched Stacklet. We'll create that into a card a little bit later, but now I'm going to move on to foiling with my Mink machine. So I've cut down that gold foil to fit over the entire background and then used up some of my scraps of gold foil to cover the 5 sentiments in the Grateful Greetings foilet panel. So you can see how pretty that turns out when we send it through. I've used a heat setting of 4. That's typically what I use when I'm foiling on cardstock, but lighter weight stocks like vellum, you can use a much lower heat setting. So now we're going to take some rosewater ink and blend it within those ginkgo leaves and also add some honey for additional dimension. So that just adds a little bit of color to that panel. And now we're going to set that panel aside and start on the final panel. I'm going to be using the Ginkgo Background, stamping it tone on tone with honey ink onto honey cardstock. And then we're going to take those individual ginkgo leaves and we're going to go ahead and emboss those with gold embossing powder onto both rosewater and Poblano Pepper cardstocks. So I have the rosewater stamped here with the VersaMark ink, and now I'm going to stamp the VersaMark over the Poblano Pepper cardstock and then pour the gold embossing powder over the top. We'll heat both of those, and while both of them turn out beautifully, I think I like the Poblano Pepper just a little bit more. You see a little bit more of that contrast with the gold embossing powder over the darker cardstock. Now we're going to line up the dies and send that through the die cut machine to cut out all 4 of those. And while I have my die cut machine out, I have die cut the sentiments that we foiled, and you can see how I'm going to arrange them on a couple of the card panels. So we're going to go ahead and put the cards together now. This is one of our sugar cube card bases. I've die cut that with the diagonal stitched rectangle stacklets. And now I'm going to place those ginkgo leaves that we embossed over the top of my background, just using that background as a guide for where to place the individual ginkgo leaves. I'm lining up my 1x3 foam strips, and I previously cut my cardstock to fit perfectly within that diagonal stitched rectangle stacklet. I added that same diagonal stitch to the foil panel, and I'll use the 1x3 foam strips to pop that up onto another sugar cube card base. So those two projects are done, and now we'll finish off the one with the arch stacklets. I have the Be Joyful sentiment, and I decided to pop that arch a little bit with a poblano pepper layer behind it. So we'll put our foam sticky strips down onto the back of that and pop it up over the top of our sugar cube card base. These cards came together really quickly and easily, and hopefully I've showed you lots of ways to combine these ginkgo-themed products together to create beautiful cards. You can find all of the products that I used at the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com.